Welcome to Full Bloom, the award-winning show that celebrates life. Here's your host, Zita Christian.
Hi everyone, welcome to Full Bloom. I'm Zita Christian. Child pornography, online bullying, identity theft, enticement of minors. These are just a few of the issues facing children and their parents on the internet. My guest tonight is here to talk about how children can help protect themselves and how parents can help protect their children. This is an important show. Please join me in welcoming my guest, Scott Driscoll. Scott, thanks very much for being on the show tonight.
My pleasure.
Now, I know you teach courses in internet safety. Tell me a little bit about your background.
Well, my background, I've been in law enforcement a little over 20 years, and I've had the fortune of working on several task forces, both state and federally, with the primary purpose of internet crimes and protecting children online. And because of that, I started my business with Internet Safety Concepts to go around and teach people the dangers that I've seen firsthand as a kid while I'm online.
You know, I want to talk about some of those dangers because taping this show right now, I mean, I noticed last night on the news on every channel was the horrific story of that young girl in Massachusetts who committed suicide because she had been a victim of online bullying.
Yes, that was a very tragic story.
That was horrible, and my thoughts go out to that family and how awful. And I wonder, from the perspective of the other students who were involved, if they had any idea of the consequences. I wonder the minds of students, do they realize how fragile?
Well, that's a unique story because from what I've heard from people up in that area, I've talked to people that live in the area, after that girl committed suicide, which is a tragedy in of itself, there was a social networking site, blog put up, or a page, shall we say, in her honor, and people were still bullying her, insulting her, and saying things after she had already passed away. So the thought process on what we do on social networking sites, I think, really has to be revisited, and people have to really think before they do something on these things.
In this whole world of the internet and of cyber safety, and particularly the fact that so much of it is not safe, I know that with some of the work you've done, undercover work, you've had to pose as a child.
Yes, I have.
Tell me a little bit about how you do that, and how difficult was it, or was it easy?
You have to be very patient.
Okay.
You have to, luckily I've got a patient family because the hours you have to work when you do undercover was completely all over the place. So my family was a great supporter. And I learned a lot from my kids. I have a freshman and I have a 5th grade daughter, and I've learned what they've done on the internet, and I've learned that. But then it was just a lot of research. I was reading the textbooks that the kids were studying in school. I was reading the same magazines they were reading. I would watch the same movies they were watching. Unfortunately, I'd listen to the same music they were listening to. And then I just learned from kids. I was talking to the kids all the time about what they were doing, and that just kind of helped me develop my undercover personas. After a while, it became easier. At first, it was a challenge, but then it got easier. And I talked to other law enforcement officers who were doing it too. And we always shared ideas and thoughts, and after a while, it became fairly easy.
You mentioned that you have 2 children. What do they think about the work that you're doing? Or at the time, or did they know that you were this undercover?
I have been honest with my kids since day one of what I do and my concerns about the internet. They're very supportive. Obviously, as kids, I'm sure they want to do more on the computer than I allow them at home, but they're very respectful, and they also understand the dangers of it because I don't pull any punches. What I see on the internet, I share with my kids so they can make sure they're safe.
Let's talk about some of those things here. I was on your website, which is quite a resource in and of itself. And one of the things that you talk about is crime investigations that you've been involved with, possession and distribution of child pornography,
Yes.
Online bullying and harassment, identity theft. What did any of these, when you were investigating these, were you surprised at the depth of some of the crime, or at some point in law enforcement do you become jaded as to crime?
I think not jaded. It takes a lot to shock you. When I first started the internet, that was a step of me getting shocked. I remember the first time going online as a kid and just sat back, and one of my lieutenants was there at the time too, and we just both went, I just can't believe that just happened. As it's gotten older now, it doesn't faze me at all, and the same thing that happened then is happening today.
But like what? For parents out there, because I know there's going to be lots of them, that they'll listen and we're talking concepts, but what are the specifics?
The first time I was online as a child, I went into a chat room, and I was a 13-year-old girl. That first time, within 5 minutes of meeting someone in that chat room, he told me he was a truck driver driving through the state of Connecticut and would pay me to meet and have sex with him.
Oh my.
That was the first conversation I had with somebody.
And if you really are a 12 or 13-year-old girl, how do you handle something like that?
Well, hopefully the 12 and 13-year-old girls aren't handling it all. As an investigator, I was trying to get some more information and try to take where I could develop a case. Even that alone, in my opinion, is what they call risk of injury to a minor in the state of Connecticut. But you got to build cases on it, and it's a difficult thing sometimes. What you want to do is you want to reach through the computer and grab the person, but we don't have that technology yet. Yeah. Yet, I hope. I hope.
Okay. Okay. I know that you also teach other law enforcement officers about the internet. So that tells me that this is, as crime goes, quite a growing field, unfortunately.
Unfortunately, it is. And with anything like this, we're all learning as we go. I consider my generation of law enforcement officers and parents as the VCR generation. When that VCR clock went off from a thunderstorm, we could go in and we can reset that 12, and that was the coolest thing we could do. We knew how that technology worked. Now, grade school kids have BlackBerries and are communicating with the world, and they're way ahead of where we ever were. Some parts of it are good. There's great resources on the internet. I love the internet. I'm not against it. It's just we have to think about safety when we're using it.
Well, let's talk about the internet for a moment, too. Now, I know that it's just celebrated its 40th birthday. Hard to believe. Absolutely hard to believe. And so when do you think in this whole birth and growth process up to these 40 years, when did it start, when did the corruption come in?
That's a great question. My gut feel would be not shortly after it was invented, someone figured out this is a good product, but it can be used for other things. It's like anything we have. There's pros and cons, and I think people at an early age realized you could hack into other people's computers and get their information. I'm sure identity theft, people that committed identity theft, when they saw the internet first come out, it was a great opportunity to learn more about it. So I don't know when the first one started, but it's been around for a while.
What about the idea of law enforcement looking at internet crime as a whole field?
It's growing. It's growing every day.
Did that start right away, though, too, like, 40 years ago? Or
no.
Did it take a while for law to realize that, hey, there's a whole field of criminals
out here? It took a while, like any kind of new thing. I mean, if you think about it, years ago, DNA was never even thought of. Now it's a regular practice. I think law enforcement is going to get up to that speed. It has to. And I know a lot of departments are getting up to speed with it and trying their best. But like anything, we have to learn as we go, too.
All right. So you teach these classes on internet safety, and I know you teach to students. You also teach to adults. I want to talk about the students for a minute.
Okay.
Because what I saw on your website, I found fascinating that there's such a difference in what you would, the topics on which you would focus, depending on the age of your audience. So let's start with the young group. Let's say the fifth graders, sixth graders.
Fifth and sixth graders are going to be spending a lot of time in game rooms. They're going to be just starting to hear about this thing called YouTube. They're going to be thinking about social networking sites. But the biggest thing that, unfortunately, is when they do the game rooms, they're going into certain game rooms with what I call free text chatting, where they can actually communicate with a stranger. They can type in their answers that they want to say.